Best of Fairy Tail 2016. As we wrap up the year 2016, which was by far one of the best years within my entire life, I want to actually recount my favorite moments from Fairy Tail over this past year. Now, a lot has happened within Fairy Tail this year, both within the anime, although it did have its lifespan definitely cut short this year, and for the manga as well. Now, overall, this was an absolutely terrific year for Fairy Tail. I'm absolutely stoked for the upcoming year of Fairy Tail. It can definitely only go uphill from here. So to kick this off, I actually want to focus on my favorite episode of 2016 in regards to the anime. Now, as I said before, sadly, the Fairy Tail anime series actually met the chopping block this year for what is still an undetermined amount of time. However, it is no doubt in my mind that will be returning soon, and that will be better than ever, seeing as the mangaka himself, Hiro Mashima, will be working closer in the production of the anime. Nevertheless, within this year, in terms of the anime, we received all of the content from the epilogue of Tartarus after the death of Igneel and whatnot, through Fairy Tail Zero, where we actually found out about the creation of the Fairy Tail Guild and just past the 1-year training time skip that Natsu and Happy went on, which leaves us at the very beginning of the Avatar arc, whenever the anime does happen to return. And even though we received little to any content in regards to the Fairy Tail anime itself, I have to say my most memorable episode by far for this year was definitely episode 276, where we received an insight into Lucy's life during the 1-year training time skip, how she went on to join Sorcerer Weekly, at first as a model, but would later actually go on to become a writer for them, and in a way get closer to achieving her lifelong dream of becoming a writer herself. Overall, throughout this episode, we see a broken Lucy. She longs for those days where she'd find Natsu making unannounced visits to her apartment, you know, those days where she watched as her fellow guildmates had those brawls and whatnot, and the days where she still had her family united. Fairy Tail. However, while working alongside her superior, trying to write a story for the magazine detailing the events of the annual Grand Magic Games, little did Lucy know that one of her closest Nakama would be making their return after a year of absence. Yes, Natsu. Natsu then went on to actually challenge the winners of the Grand Magic Games, and in return actually burned down the whole Colosseum, which, I mean, like, it's to be expected. It's Natsu we're talking about. He's a lovable pyromaniac. To say the very least, though, this episode definitely got to me. This tugged at my heartstrings, yo. Like, listen, I absolutely love Lucy within Fairy Tail. She's one of my favorite female characters, but to see her so broken because of the events within her life as of recently, not even her progress towards achieving one of her longest life goals to become a writer, in the end of things, could even cheer her up. It just really added to her character overall and made it evident that she really longs for her friends and family. As well, the scene where Natsu actually returns and burns down the entirety of the Colosseum while fighting the Grand Magic Games victors was by far one of my favorite Natsu moments with the entirety of the anime. Like, when that shit got dubbed, I was freaking out. I was losing my shit. Like, you put Todd Habercorn on as badass as a scene like that, that shit is going to be fire. There's no way around it. That is pure facts right there. But nevertheless, that was a truly fantastic scene. However, what really brought the episode together for a full circle in the grand scheme of things was when Natsu and Lucy saw each other for the first time in a year. That was just an absolutely beautiful moment, and overall, this is my reasoning as to why episode 276 of Fairy Tail was my favorite episode of 2016. Let's take a trip to the manga side of things now. Oh my. In contrast to the anime, so much took place within the manga this year for Fairy Tail. Listen, the Fairy Tail manga was absolute fire this year. There's no way around it. That is pure facts once again, and I'm so excited for 2017. Again, only because I sure as hell know that it will be better than this year, which even this year, as I said before, was absolutely fantastic. We started this year off with the whole entire Brandish situation, where we actually found out Lucy and Brandish's connection to one another, the fact that Brandish's mother actually was friends and knew Layla Heartfilia, and how Brandish actually blamed the Heartfilias for the assassination of her own mother. Later on down the road, we were also introduced to Eileen Bell Sirion, who was even later on revealed to be Urza's mother. Along with that, we were introduced to Zeref and Mavis's son, Larkade Dragneel, the final Spriggan of the Spriggan 12, and although he was kind of a disappointment when he was beaten by Sting, you cannot deny the fact that he is going to come back better than ever, and that he was absolutely amazing for a couple of chapters there. Now, we as well saw Gajiel and Juvia's lives torn away in front of our eyes. However, they were actually both revived very soon after. Gray found out that Natsu is END this year, and we actually saw a glimpse into Natsu's END form, with him beginning to take on his transformation. This caused Natsu and Gray to actually fight one another, a fight that was anticipated throughout the entirety of this year. Sadly, though, it was ended by Urza. However, I still definitely do consider it one of, if not the best fight of the entire year. We were then as well revealed Natsu and Zera's parents, and lastly, we received Urza and Eileen's past in its entirety, where Eileen was actually the sole creator of Dragon Slayer magic over 400 years ago, and for a long stretch of time was a dragon herself. Yeah, as I said, a lot happened this year within the Fairy Tail manga, so much that unlike the anime side of things, I really cannot determine a singular chapter that stands out the best out of all of them. However, there are a few chapters this year that hold a special place within my heart that I'm going to share with you guys right now. Let's start with chapters 503 and 504. Now, I'm combining these chapters seeing as there's no reason not to. Essentially, these chapters gave us our very first glimpse at END, something that has been hyped up for a few years up until this point. We actually saw Natsu take on his END form due to Demaria and the cruel torture and pain that she inflicted on Lucy, nearly gouging Lucy's eyes out at one point, and at that point, Natsu thought Lucy had died, which caused him to overall turn into END, or a little bit of END, because we did not see the full transformation. Within the next chapter, Natsu and Gray actually made contact with one another, and when Gray was met face to face with END, the demon he promised prior to his father's death that he would slay no matter what, even though the demon overall was his best friend, he did not hold back. This caused the Natsu versus Gray fight, which was by far my favorite fight of this entire year. Sadly, however, later on down the road, the fight was actually stopped by Urza along with the END transformation overall, but when it does come down to it, you cannot deny the fact that Fairy Tail's greatness was shown within chapters 503 and 504. Fairy Tail chapter 510. Yo, what can I say about this chapter? This was by far one of my favorite chapters of this year, simply because from day one, Fairy Tail's biggest question, or one of the biggest questions, was who is Natsu's mother and father? Who is the parents of this lovable pyromaniac within Fairy Tail? And within this chapter, this question that was asked for a decade long was finally answered. We saw Natsu and Zera's parents within this chapter. We got a glimpse into the death of Natsu and his parents, and overall, we received a large amount of information on Natsu and Zera's past. And lastly, Fairy Tail chapter 515. Oh my god. This chapter was definitely a mindfuck. That's putting it lightly there. That is absolutely putting it lightly. A lot of people actually said that this chapter was the best chapter of Fairy Tail within 2016 in its entirety. However, at this point, I really can't decide myself, but I can definitely agree that this chapter was absolutely amazing, and surely some of that Fairy Tail greatness was flexed within this chapter, and that is a fact right there. Within this chapter, we actually received the entire story behind Eileen Belisarian, how she was once the queen of the dragons over 400 years ago while the Dragon Civil War was taking place, how she later went on to become one of, if not the very first Dragon Slayer, and essentially is the mother of such a powerful magic, a magic that in the grand scheme of things is capable of slaying a dragon. We saw a side effect of this immense power, however, with the dragon seed, which actually caused Eileen to take part in a dragon transformation, and as well caused her to be thought of as an enemy to her own kingdom. She was beaten, tortured, humiliated until one day her own husband, the father of Urza, was sent to slay her, which didn't happen because she turned into a dragon at that very moment. She would remain a dragon for centuries afterwards, roaming the world for an anecdote to her transformation and a way to overall become human once again, until she met Zeref, who gifted her with the mere physique of a human. However, when it came down to it, she was still a dragon. Now, this actually caused her to attempt to enchant herself into a human by utilizing the body of her unborn child, Urza, which then actually failed and caused her to abandon Urza at Rosemary Village once Urza was born. Nevertheless, that's going to wrap it up for me in regards to my favorite moments of Fairy Tail this year. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. The question is, what was your favorite Fairy Tail moment within the entirety of 2016? Do not forget to leave your answer in the form of a comment within the comment section below. Like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and thank you all for a fan-fucking-tastic year. Here's to 2017.